Welcome to Suri Cheating Story, where we share true stories of betrayal in love. Our channel brings heartfelt, real-life experiences from those who have endured the pain of infidelity. Whether you're facing challenges in your own relationship or seeking to better understand the complexities of love and trust, Suri Cheating Story is the place for you. Subscribe now to explore the emotional depths in the path to healing with us. Suri's fingers trembled as she adjusted the delicate lace of her wedding dress. The soft fabric brushed against her skin, the gentle scent of jasmine lingering in the air. It should have been the happiest day of her life. Today, she was marrying the man of her dreams, Jonathan Carter, a successful millionaire who had swept her off her feet with his charm, wealth, and promises of a life filled with luxury and love. The sun poured through the stained glass windows of the church, casting colorful reflections across the floor. The guests had already taken their seats, eagerly awaiting the ceremony to begin. Suri looked into the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Her heart was full, her mind racing with excitement and anticipation. She had waited for this moment for so long. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps approaching. Suri's mother, a woman who had always been calm and composed, stepped into the room, her expression unreadable. There was no joy in her eyes today, only a quiet unease. Suri's heart skipped a beat. Suri, her mother's voice was soft but firm. I think you should go to him now. He's waiting. Suri nodded, her nerves fluttering in her chest. I'll be right there, she replied, forcing a smile as she tried to steady herself. The door creaked open and her mother stepped back, leaving her alone in the room once more. But as the seconds stretched into minutes, something strange began to stir inside Suri. Her hands grew cold and her stomach tightened with an unfamiliar anxiety. Was she truly ready for this life? Was she making the right decision? She shook off the thought. This was Jonathan. He was everything she had ever wanted. Handsome, wealthy, successful. A man with a future so bright that it seemed impossible to turn away. They had built a life together. This was it. This was the culmination of everything she had dreamed of. Suri walked down the aisle, her heart pounding. The guests' eyes followed her every step, and the church was silent except for the sound of her heels clicking on the marble floor. But as she approached the altar, she noticed something unsettling. Jonathan was looking at his watch, his posture stiff and distracted. A knot twisted in Suri's stomach, and her smile faltered. Had she misread something? He had been distant lately, but she chalked it up to wedding nerves. He was always so busy, so focused on his career. She didn't think much of it, until now. Jonathan's eyes met hers for a brief moment, but his gaze didn't carry the warmth and excitement she had expected. There was something in his eyes, something cold and indifferent. It made her blood run cold. The priest began the ceremony, but Suri's mind was elsewhere, her heart in her throat. She felt a distant tug, like something deep inside her was screaming that this was all wrong. And then it happened. Just as the vows were about to begin, Jonathan stood up abruptly. His face was a mask of indifference, his body tense with discomfort. Wait, he said, his voice cold and distant. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. Suri froze, her breath catching in her throat. What do you mean? She whispered, her voice barely audible. The room seemed to close in on her, the air growing thick and heavy. Jonathan's eyes were hard, distant. I can't marry you, Suri. I never could, he said, his words piercing through her heart like a dagger. This isn't what I want. The shock hit her like a freight train. The world around her seemed to spin, and she gripped the edge of the altar to steady herself. What are you talking about? She gasped, her voice trembling with disbelief. Why? Why now? Jonathan didn't answer immediately. He simply turned his back to her, his movements deliberate, as though everything had already been decided. You're just not what I need anymore. Sorry, he said coldly, his words hitting her like a slap in the face. I never should have gotten involved with you. I need someone who understands my world, someone who doesn't cling to me, someone who can handle the pressure. I'm sorry, but this isn't it. Suri's heart shattered in that moment. The world she had built in her mind, the dreams of a perfect life with Jonathan, crumbled in an instant. The tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of everyone. She turned to leave, but her legs felt like they might give way beneath her. The sound of Jonathan's voice followed her, distant and fading, but it didn't matter anymore. The man she had once loved was no longer there. The man she had trusted was gone, leaving her standing alone in a room full of people who had no idea what had just happened. She stumbled out of the church, her dress heavy around her as the weight of reality set in. She wasn't just left at the altar, she had been abandoned, humiliated and rejected in the most public way possible. But in the quiet moments after the storm, a new realization began to form inside her. She had to survive. She had to rebuild her life, no matter how broken she felt. And so Suri stepped into the unknown, her heart bruised but still beating. She didn't know how, but she knew she would rise again. The months that followed Jonathan's abrupt departure were a blur of pain, confusion, and loneliness. Suri could barely bring herself to step out of her apartment, let alone face the world. She had been shattered in ways she didn't think were possible. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted with her heart and soul, had torn it all apart in an instant. But as the days stretched on, something began to shift within her. The anger, the hurt, and the overwhelming sadness began to simmer down into something else. A quiet, determined resolve. She had been left at the altar. She had been humiliated, but she still had a life to live. She still had herself. Suri's days quickly settled into a routine. She spent most of her time focusing on the small things that kept her going. She worked long hours at her job, first as an assistant at a law firm, and then later as a full-fledged paralegal, doing anything she could to distract herself from the gnawing emptiness inside. When she wasn't working, she buried herself in the simple acts of daily life, shopping for groceries, taking walks in the park, and doing her best to avoid the constant reminder of the life she had lost. But the weight of being a single woman in a world that valued relationships still hung over her like a heavy cloak. At the grocery store, she felt eyes on her. Pitying eyes, curious eyes, wondering what had happened. People who once knew her as the future wife of Jonathan Carter now whispered behind her back. They had seen her enter the church with a smile on her face, and now they saw her leave alone. Suri had no choice but to keep moving forward, even though it felt like her world was stuck in reverse. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she had to put one foot in front of the other. Months turned into a year, and Suri had convinced herself that the worst was behind her. But life, it seemed, had more challenges in store for her. It was a late afternoon when the phone call came. The sound of her phone buzzing on the counter was faint, almost lost in the hum of the room. She had been used to ignoring the calls that came from unfamiliar numbers, but something about this one felt different. She picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. "Suri!" A voice on the other end of the line said, deep and familiar. "It's Jonathan." She froze, the blood in her veins turning to ice. Jonathan. The name was like a ghost haunting her. It had been over a year since she had heard from him, and the silence had been a kind of relief. But now hearing his voice again sent a shockwave through her body. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice cold, sharp, guarded. "I need to see you," he said, his voice softer now, almost apologetic. "There's something I need to tell you." Her mind raced. She had no idea what to expect, and she wasn't sure if she even wanted to hear what he had to say, but curiosity gnawed at her, pulling her in. Suri hesitated before replying. "Fine, but don't take too long." The meeting was set for the following week. When the day arrived, Suri's nerves were on edge. She had no idea what Jonathan was going to say, but she wasn't sure she was prepared for it. The restaurant where they agreed to meet was dimly lit, with quiet music playing in the background. Jonathan was already sitting at a corner table, looking out the window. He looked almost the same, but there was something different in his eyes, something guarded, uncertain. Suri sat down across from him, her arms crossed. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice tight. Jonathan looked up at her, his expression conflicted. "I've been thinking about everything, Suri. About us. About what happened." Suri's breath caught in her chest. "Really? After all this time, you want to talk about it now?" she asked, the bitterness creeping into her voice. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to hear me out," Jonathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I left you because I was scared, Suri. I thought I needed someone who was more like me, someone who could keep up with my lifestyle, but that wasn't the problem. I was the problem. I didn't deserve you." Suri shook her head, incredulous. "And now what? You think you can just waltz back into my life and expect everything to be okay? You broke me." "Jonathan, You took everything I had, everything we built, and you threw it all away without a second thought. Jonathan's eyes dropped, guilt and shame flooding his features. I never should have left you, he said quietly, and I can't undo the damage I've done, but I want to be part of your life again. I want to help you with the kids. I want to make things right. Suri froze. Kids? What was he talking about? Then it hit her, something she had kept hidden, something that had become her world. She wasn't just living for herself anymore. I have children, Jonathan, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You walked away, but I kept moving forward. I didn't need you. I built my life from the ground up. And now you want to come back in and try to fix things? What makes you think I want anything to do with you? There was a long silence between them. Jonathan's face was pale, and for the first time, Suri saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. Real, tangible regret. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. I'm sorry. Sorry, Jonathan whispered, but I want to try. I want to be there for our children. I want to fix the past. Suri's heart clenched, but she steeled herself. She had moved on. She had built a life without him, and as much as part of her wanted to give in, to allow him back into her life, she knew that she couldn't. Not now. Not after everything. You can't fix the past, Jonathan, Suri said firmly, her voice steady. But you can try to be a good father. That's all you can do now. I'm not waiting for you. My children are my future, and I won't let you drag us back into that dark place again. Jonathan looked at her, defeated. I understand, he said softly. I just wanted to make it right. Suri stood up, her heart heavy, but her mind clear. You can start by being the father they need. But that's all. Don't come back into my life, Jonathan. Not unless you can prove you're worthy of it. And with that, Suri walked out of the restaurant, leaving the past in Jonathan behind. She had built her life again, and this time, it was hers. And no one, no matter how much they begged for forgiveness, was going to take that away from her. After the encounter with Jonathan, Suri found herself at a crossroads. She had felt the surge of old emotions when he had first arrived. Guilt, pain, a desire to understand. But with every passing moment, as she looked into his eyes, all she could see was the betrayal. The life she had built alone, the challenges she had overcome, and the strength she had found within herself had made her realize something profound. She was no longer the woman who had once needed him. She was strong, she was whole, and she wasn't going to let the ghosts of her past tear down the future she was fighting for. It wasn't easy. Every day was still a battle to maintain her sense of self. There were moments when loneliness would creep in, and the weight of her responsibilities as a single mother would feel unbearable. There were times when she would lie awake at night, her heart aching for the family she had dreamed of, wondering if she had made the right decision. But then she would hear the soft giggles of her children from the next room, their tiny hands reaching for her in the morning, and she would know without a doubt this was the life she was meant to live. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. Suri continued to raise her children with love and dedication, focusing on providing them with stability, education, and the sense of security that she never had. Despite the challenges, she felt something inside her shifting. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. At work, she had earned the respect of her colleagues and bosses. As a paralegal, she had proven herself time and time again, working late nights, going above and beyond to show her worth. She had earned promotions, her salary increased, and she was well on her way to becoming a full-fledged attorney. Her career was flourishing, and the thought of needing Jonathan to validate her success was laughable. She had built it all herself, but there was still something missing. She knew she was capable of achieving so much more. The desire for a sense of belonging. The longing for something more than just work and motherhood began to grow stronger. She had dedicated herself entirely to her children and her career, but somewhere deep inside, there was a yearning for a partner who would understand her ambitions, who would lift her up without expectations or demands. But the thought of trusting someone again seemed impossible. She had given everything to Jonathan, and he had broken her heart. Could she ever risk it again? It wasn't until she met Thomas that she began to reconsider her belief in love and companionship. He was a colleague she had met at a legal seminar. From the first moment they spoke, she noticed the ease in their conversation. Thomas was kind, Genuine, and most importantly, he never pressured her. He respected her boundaries and was patient, never rushing her into anything. They shared the same passion for the law, but it was their casual coffee meetings, discussing everything from work to books and parenting, that made Suri feel comfortable in his presence. At first, Suri kept her distance, unsure of her feelings. She wasn't looking for another relationship, and she definitely didn't want to risk her heart again. But slowly over time, Thomas earned her trust. He didn't make her feel like she needed to be something she wasn't. He admired her strength and resilience. He wasn't intimidated by her success. In fact, he celebrated it. He made her feel seen, heard, and valued in ways Jonathan never had. One evening, after a long day of work, Suri found herself meeting Thomas for coffee. They talked about the challenges of balancing work and life, about their kids and about their goals. As she spoke, she realized something that made her heart race. She was beginning to care for him. "I've always admired your determination." "Suri," Thomas said, his voice gentle, "you've built an incredible life for yourself and your children, and you do it all with so much grace. It's honestly inspiring." Suri's heart fluttered at his words. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not just as a mother or a worker, but as a woman. And it was a feeling she had almost forgotten existed. "I've made mistakes," she said, her voice soft, "and I've had my heart broken. I didn't think I could ever trust anyone again, let alone open up to someone new. But you make me feel like it's possible, like I deserve to be happy too." Thomas reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "You do deserve it, Suri. You're an incredible woman, and anyone would be lucky to be by your side." Her breath caught in her throat, and for the first time in years, Suri allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future with someone else. Not to replace Jonathan, but to share her life with someone who truly understood her. She could have both, her career, her children, and the love she had been too afraid to reach for. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, she knew that. Trust was something she would have to rebuild, both in herself and in others. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. The future was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid of it. She wasn't alone. She had her children, her career, and the possibility of a new beautiful chapter with someone who respected and cherished her for the woman she had become. And with that, Suri allowed herself to smile for the first time in years. A smile that wasn't just about surviving, but about thriving, about loving, and about the incredible power of starting over. As the weeks turned into months, Suri found herself falling deeper into the rhythm of this new life. She had slowly, almost cautiously, allowed herself to open up to Thomas. The walls she had so carefully constructed around her heart began to crack. And while the process was slow and deliberate, the healing was undeniable. She continued to pour her energy into her children, her job, and the relationship that was now blossoming between her and Thomas. The days were filled with the hustle and bustle of parenthood, work, and responsibilities, but they also had moments of joy. She no longer felt the suffocating weight of loneliness that had once gripped her heart. Now she shared her evenings with Thomas, talking about everything and nothing, laughing together over coffee, walking through the park with the kids, and planning small trips that made them feel like a real family. For the first time in years, Suri allowed herself to believe that this life she was creating, this life full of love, stability, and possibility, wasn't a dream. It was her reality. But even with all the progress she had made, there were still moments when doubt crept in, when the familiar fear of being abandoned or hurt again started to whisper in her ear. It wasn't easy to let go of the past. Jonathan's betrayal still stung deep within her, especially during the quiet moments when she found herself reflecting on the life she had lost. Her heart still carried the scars of his abandonment, and it wasn't always easy to silence those ghosts. One afternoon, as Suri sat in her living room, playing with her children, a familiar name flashed across her phone screen. Jonathan's. Her heart dropped to her stomach, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. It had been months since she'd heard from him, and the memories of his rejection flooded her all at once. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen. She had moved on. She had built a life without him, but there was still a part of her that wondered, what could he possibly want now? With a deep breath, Suri answered the call. "Jonathan?" Her voice was steady. but her heart was pounding in her chest. "Suri, it's Jonathan," he said, his voice tentative. "I know this is a lot to ask, but I need to talk to you. About the kids. About what's best for them." Suri's chest tightened. She had expected this call for a long time. Jonathan had made it clear when he left that he didn't want to be part of her life, let alone their children's lives. Why the sudden change? "What is this about?" she asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. "I've been thinking a lot," Jonathan said, his words slow, deliberate. "I've seen the boys, they're growing so fast, and I know I wasn't there when they needed me, but I want to be there now. I want to do right by them. I want to be involved in their lives, Suri. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to make amends." The words sent a wave of confusion through Suri. Jonathan was the man who had walked away, who had left her standing alone at the altar. Now, after all this time, he was asking to be a part of her children's lives. Was this genuine? Or was it just another attempt to control the narrative, to re-enter their lives on his terms? Her mind raced. She had worked so hard to protect her children from the pain of Jonathan's absence. She had rebuilt their lives with love and care. Could she really let him back in? "You left us, Jonathan," Suri said, her voice sharp but quiet. "You left us when we needed you the most. Now you want to play the hero? It's not that simple. You can't just waltz back into our lives and expect everything to be okay. My children have moved on. They have a family. They have me." Jonathan's voice softened. "I know, Suri. And I don't expect everything to be fine overnight. I'm asking for a chance to be there. A chance to be a father to them." There was a long pause as Suri's mind swirled with conflicting emotions. She wanted to protect her children from the pain of rejection. She wanted to believe Jonathan's words. But a part of her knew that forgiveness, real forgiveness, would take time, and that might never come. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice steady. "But don't get your hopes up, Jonathan. Things aren't the same anymore, and they never will be." She ended the call, the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. She couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right choice. Could Jonathan really change? Or was this just another empty promise, one that would only bring more hurt? The rest of the day passed in a blur, and as Suri lay in bed that night, she thought about the conversation. She thought about her children, their laughter, their trust in her. She couldn't risk their happiness. She couldn't allow Jonathan to waltz back into their lives without proving that he was truly worthy of being their father. And so, Suri made a promise to herself. She wouldn't let the past control her anymore. She wouldn't let Jonathan's mistakes dictate her future. Her life was her own now, and no one, no matter how much they claimed to care, could take that away from her. As the night stretched on, Suri closed her eyes, feeling the quiet peace of the life she had created. The next chapter of her story was hers to write, and this time, she would be the one holding the pen. Days passed after her conversation with Jonathan, and Suri's heart felt heavy, burdened by the decision she had yet to make. Jonathan's words echoed in her mind constantly, his apology, his plea to be a part of their children's lives. But she knew in her heart that trusting him again, after everything he had done, wouldn't be easy. She had built a life without him, and she wasn't sure if she could ever let him back in. But what she did know was this: she had worked so hard to create something beautiful, something solid for her children. They had a family she had formed on her own, one filled with love, respect, and stability. She wasn't about to risk that for an empty promise. Suri knew she needed to let go of the past, to stop allowing Jonathan's presence in her life to control her future. The decisions she had made in the past had shaped who she was today, and she was proud of the woman she had become. A woman who had the strength to rise above heartbreak, a woman who didn't need a man to define her worth. It wasn't long before Thomas, the gentle man who had been her steady support throughout these months, began to notice a shift in Suri. There was a quiet peace about her now, an acceptance of who she was. They had continued to grow closer, building a friendship first and then something more. He respected her independence, admired her resilience, and never pressured her to make any decisions about their future. But now as he looked at her, he could see a woman who had finally found peace within herself. One evening as they sat together, Thomas took her hand gently, his eyes soft with understanding. "Suri, I can see that you've been carrying a lot, and I know it's not easy. But you don't have to carry it alone anymore. I'm here, whatever you need. Suri looked at him, her heart full of gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could trust again. She had fought so hard for her happiness, for her children's future, and she was starting to realize that it didn't have to be a fight anymore. It could be a journey, one that didn't require her to fight for every step. I've spent so much time thinking about what I want, Suri said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. But I never really let myself think about what I deserve. I deserve happiness. I deserve peace. And I deserve to let go of the past so I can embrace the future. Thomas smiled softly, a sense of pride and admiration shining in his eyes. You do, Suri. You deserve all of that and more. As Suri sat there with Thomas by her side and her children playing in the next room, she realized something profound. She had finally come to a place where she could let go of the past and move forward. She didn't need Jonathan's approval, nor did she need to hold on to the pain of their broken relationship. The family she had created on her own was everything she needed. And now with Thomas, she felt ready to open her heart again. But this time, it was on her terms. The future stretched out before her, bright, full of promise and free of the shadows of her past. She had built a life, a future, one step at a time, and she was proud of what she had achieved. No longer burdened by fear or uncertainty, Suri was ready to embrace the life she had always dreamed of, a life filled with love, fulfillment, and the joy of starting over. And so Suri began a new chapter in her life. The past was behind her, and the future was full of endless possibilities. She had come so far, and with the love of her children and the steady support of Thomas, she knew that she could handle whatever came next. This was just the beginning of her journey, one where happiness, love, and the strength she had discovered within herself would guide her every step of the way. If you find this story interesting and want to see more touching, tense, but meaningful situations, don't forget to subscribe to our channel today. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Share this story with your friends and remember to like the video so we can stay motivated to bring you more great and meaningful content. Thank you for watching and supporting us.